I was 27 years old, sitting at the kitchen table of my small apartment, staring at a number on my phone screen. $100,000. I looked around the room. The couch was secondhand. The car outside had 90,000 miles and a scratch on the bumper. And the TV was small and bought refurbished on eBay. My friends thought I was struggling. I wasn't struggling. I was building something nobody around me could see. Stay with me because today I'm going to share the 12 frugal habits that helped me save $100,000 before I turned 30. But before I get into the habits, I need to be honest with you. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't come from a family with money. I didn't receive an inheritance, and I didn't make a lucky bet in the stock market. I was a regular person with a regular salary, $11,000 in student debt, and an apartment that my girlfriend Sarah affectionately called cozy. Cozy. That was a kind word from her. But here's what Sarah didn't know. I had a silent plan that I had been executing for almost 3 years, while everyone around me was living in the present without thinking about the future. It wasn't a complicated plan. There were no fancy spreadsheets or Wall Street strategies. It was simply 12 habits that I followed consistently day after day, without making any noise about it. And you know what's most interesting? None of these habits require you to earn more than you already do. None of them require you to give up everything you enjoy. And none of them require you to be a financial genius. They only require one thing, that you start. And the first habit is going to show you exactly where to begin. The first habit was also the simplest one, and honestly, the one that changed everything. On the day I received my first paycheck, before paying any bill, before buying anything, before even seeing the money in my account, I set up an automatic transfer to my investments. $500 left my account automatically on payday, going straight into my Roth IRA and my 401k. I never saw that money, it never entered my spending reality, and my brain simply learned to live on what was left. And you know what's fascinating about this? Most people do exactly the opposite. They receive their paycheck, pay their bills, spend what's left, and try to save whatever remains at the end of the month. The problem is that at the end of the month, there's almost never anything left. When you automate your investments first, you remove the decision from the equation, and decisions are exactly where most people fail. Sarah once asked me why I always seemed so tight on money every week, and I smiled and told her it was just the way I liked to manage things. What I didn't tell her was that at that moment, I already had over $20,000 invested. She didn't know, and I wasn't ready to tell her yet. The second habit is going to sound ridiculously simple, and that's exactly why it works. Every night before bed, I picked up a cheap notebook I bought at the dollar store for $3 and wrote down everything I had spent that day. Every purchase, every transfer, every coffee, every gallon of gas. It wasn't a sophisticated app. It wasn't an elaborate spreadsheet. It was just a notebook and a pen. And for the first 2 weeks, it felt completely obsessive, but then it became automatic, like brushing my teeth. The act of writing forced my brain to process every expense twice, once when it happened and once when I recorded it, and that second time was where the magic happened. By the end of the first month, I had identified over $300 in spending I didn't even know I was doing. Forgotten subscriptions, snacks at work, impulse purchases that seemed small but added up fast. That $3 notebook saved me thousands of dollars. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah caught me sitting at the table writing down the week's expenses and asked what I was doing. I told her I was just organizing some things. She smiled and went back to the couch. She never imagined that little notebook was part of a much bigger plan. The third habit was probably the hardest one to stick to, not because it required a lot of discipline, but because it required me to swallow my pride more than once. When I started working, most of my friends went straight for nice apartments in modern neighborhoods, with gyms, balconies, and those open-concept kitchens that look great on Instagram. I went in the opposite direction. I found a simple, clean, and safe apartment for $1,100 a month and signed the lease without thinking twice. Because I knew my take-home pay at the time was around $3,200 a month, and 25% of that was right around $800. I went a little over my target, but it was close enough, and the location made sense. While my friends were paying between $1,600 and $1,900 a month in rent, I was paying $1,100, and the difference of almost $600 a month went straight into my investments. $600 a month invested over 3 years at an 8% annual return turns into over $24,000. All of that because I chose a smaller apartment. Sarah visited my apartment for the first time on a Sunday afternoon, looked around with that smile of hers, and said the place had personality. And I knew right then that she was the right person for me, because anyone else would have just called it small. The fourth habit goes against everything American culture teaches about success. In the United States, there is a silent pressure to drive a car that impresses, a new car, financed, shiny, that tells the world you've made it. I completely ignored that pressure. I bought a 2014 Honda Civic with 85,000 miles for $8,500 from a private seller I found on Craigslist. And before closing the deal, I paid $75 to have a mechanic inspect the car, which saved me from 2 other cars that had hidden problems. I paid in cash, no monthly payment, no interest, no debt. And I kept that car for all 3 years while I was building my $100,000. At that time, the average monthly payment for a new car in the United States was over $700, which means most people were spending over $8,000 a year just on the payment alone, not counting insurance, gas, and maintenance. My total annual cost for the car was approximately $3,200, including everything. The difference of almost $400 a month went straight into my investments. One day, Sarah asked me if I didn't want to trade in the car. It had a small crack in the windshield I had been ignoring for months. I looked at her and said the car still worked perfectly. What I didn't say was that every month I kept that car was one more month of investments working for our future. For the future, I was planning for the 2 of us. The 5th habit was the one that surprised me most in terms of financial impact, because it seemed too small to make a real difference. The truth is, I was never much of a cook, but I learned early that eating out every day was quietly destroying my budget. That's where Sarah came in. She loved cooking, and when I told her I wanted to stop depending on delivery, she offered to help. Every Sunday afternoon, she would come over to my apartment. She cooked. I helped chop the vegetables and prep the ingredients, and by the end of the day, the fridge was full for the entire week. Simple, practical meals that solved the problem, and most importantly, when I got home tired from work, there was always something ready waiting for me, which completely eliminated the temptation of delivery. My monthly grocery bill was around $280, while the American average was $450 to $500 on groceries alone, plus another $300 to $400 on restaurants and delivery. I was spending almost half of what my friends spent on food, and the difference of $350 a month went straight into my investments. $350 a month invested over 3 years at an 8% annual return turns into over $14,000. Sarah thought she was helping me eat better, and she was. But without knowing it, she was also helping me build our future. The 6th habit is going to make a lot of people raise an eyebrow, but let me show you the numbers before you judge. The average gym membership in the United States costs between $40 and $60 a month, and most Americans use the gym 4 or 5 times a month at most, which means each visit costs between $8 and $15. I never paid for a gym membership. I ran outside 3 times a week, did bodyweight exercises in my apartment, following a free program on YouTube, and bought a used pull-up bar on Craigslist for $15 and a jump rope for $8. My total fitness investment was $23, and I worked out 5 to 6 days a week. The $50 I wasn't spending on a gym membership every month went straight into my Roth IRA, which might seem like a small amount, but $50 a month over 25 years at an 8% annual return turns into approximately $47,000. A used pull-up bar and a jump rope are worth $47,000 in future wealth. Nobody at the gym was running those numbers on the treadmill. One Saturday morning, Sarah ran into me at the park near my apartment and asked if she could join me. I said yes, and from that point on, our weekend morning runs became a ritual between us. The cheapest habit I had ended up becoming one of the most valuable parts of our relationship. The seventh habit is going to seem obvious to some people and completely outdated to others, but the numbers speak for themselves. I read an average of 2 books a month on finance, business, human behavior, anything that helped me think better about money and about life. And I didn't buy a single one of them. My local library gave me free access to thousands of physical books. And through the Libby app, I could access audiobooks and ebooks that I listened to during my commute to work. Completely free. A reader who buys their books spends an average of $250 to $400 a year. I spent zero, and still read more than most people I knew. But here's the part I didn't expect. The library habit changed my relationship with consumption in a much broader way, because when you learn that you can have access to something without needing to own it, you start questioning that same logic in every other area of your life too. Why buy when you can access? Why own when you can use? That question started showing up in every purchase decision I made. One day I took Sarah to the library with me to pick up a book I had reserved. She looked around, grabbed 3 books for herself, and said she had no idea the library was still this good. I smiled and told her it was one of my favorite places. It still is. Every year I called my internet provider, car insurance company, and cell phone carrier, told them I was considering canceling, and asked what they could offer to keep me as a customer. According to Consumer Reports, 70% of people who do this get a reduction. I got reductions on all 3 in the first year, saving around $480 annually with less than 30 minutes of phone calls. That's almost $1,000 per hour in tax-free savings. No side hustle pays that well for that little effort. Every 2 weeks, I withdrew $200 in cash. That was my entire budget for dining out, entertainment, and personal purchases. When the cash was gone, it was gone until the next paycheck. No exceptions. Research shows that people spend 12 to 18% less when using physical cash instead of a card, because paying with cash triggers an emotional response in the brain that swiping a card simply doesn't. The envelope was my governor. It didn't let me overspend because it physically couldn't. Any purchase over $30 that wasn't essential waited 24 hours. If I still wanted it the next day, I bought it. If I forgot about it, I didn't. This habit eliminated approximately 60% of my impulse purchases. The urge to buy is almost always emotional, and after 24 hours, the emotion passes, and what remains is the rational decision. Tax refund, birthday money, any freelance work I picked up in my spare time, everything went straight to investments. No exceptions. Behavioral economists call it mental accounting. The tendency to treat unexpected money differently from your paycheck, as if it were permission to spend. I eliminated that distinction completely. To me, every dollar was fuel for investments. This was the simplest habit and the most overlooked by most Americans. My company offered a 100% match on the first 3% of my salary that I contributed, which meant $1,560 a year in free money that my employer deposited into my retirement account. Free money. All I had to do was check a box and choose a contribution percentage, and yet most people ignore this benefit completely. I wasn't going to be one of them. 12 habits, almost 3 years, $100,000. On a $52,000 salary, some freelance work on the side, and a discipline that nobody around me could see. It wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous. And it definitely wasn't the path most people would choose. But it worked. And on the day that number appeared on my phone screen, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I went to the jewelry store, chose the ring, paid in cash, and asked Sarah to marry me. She said yes, and everything she thought was just financial organization, the Sundays cooking together, the runs in the park, the visits to the library, was actually the foundation of a life I was building for the two of us. And if you want to start building that with your partner today, Sarah and I created something special to help you take the first step. The link to the Couple Financial Planner plus Vision Board is in the description. Go check it out. Now tell me something in the comments. Of the 12 habits I shared today, which one do you think would have the biggest impact on your financial life right now? Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Every week there's new content on money, family, mindset, and purpose. See you next time.